Okay, welcome to Company Officer Boot Camp Module 2, Setting Expectations. And we're going to go through a quick synopsis of kind of how to develop those expectations, how to deliver them, and how to stick with them. It sounds really simple, but especially if you've got a hard crew or you've got a well-established crew and you're coming into a new environment, sometimes it can be a real challenge. So first and foremost, you have to have a plan before you get there. Don't go in cold. So whether you're getting a new shift, a new house, a new crew, whatever it might be, when you get promoted, you have to have a plan. You have to sit down and actually think about things. Think about what you expect from them. It might not be easy to come up with a lot of answers and a lot of ideas because you're new to them. Maybe you're a new officer, or maybe you're in a new area, new house. So you have to think about the things specifically and really break them down. Try not to be real general because what will happen is they're going to ask questions and they're going to want specifics. Secondly, don't shoot from the hip. Try not to, when you sit down at the table or when you sit down with your crew, don't try to come up with things right then and there. If new ideas develop from that meeting, it's fine to write them down, but you might want to give them some thought before you give them clear, concise orders on how you want them to do that. And finally, write it down. Write all of your expectations down, and I would prioritize those. Some things that are not going to take much discussion, they're not going to be a big issue, put those first. Get through them real quick. The ones that are going to take longer that you expect more resistance from, do those things last. Get them done as at the end of the thing, so you're not taking a lot of time. Establish the expectations very early. That was one of the keys that I did. My very first shift, I sat down and I picked a time that after the other crew, the off-going crew was gone. They were out of the firehouse. Nobody was really around. It was early enough that the staff hadn't arrived because we don't want any additional influences on our people. It's going to be tough enough with the entire crew there, and you don't want any outside influences. You don't want people acting differently because maybe their buddy's standing there. So timing's essential, and you want to do it as quickly as possible when you get your new crew or house. Be organized. Again, have your list ready. Have an idea of how you're going to address questions, how you're going to allow others to respond back, what order you're going to go in, and have some note space to write down ideas, suggestions, comments. They may come up with things that you haven't thought of, and you want to be organized and ready to go. We talked about let the other crew get out of there and don't back down, but allow input. And all that means is even if they make a good point, maybe you're not quite ready to commit to it till you have full time to think about it, and you need to identify that with them. Say, listen, I think it's a really good idea, but I want to think about it or discuss it a little bit further before I commit to it one way or the other. I'm not telling you no, I'm not telling you yes, but before we take that suggestion, that comment, I want time to think about all the variables, the good that can come from it and maybe the bad that can come from it. And input's important as long as they stay on task. Don't let them vary from one issue to the next. Stay on that issue. Because some discussions are going to go start at point A and they'll end up way down the road somewhere else, and you've got to keep them on point. Change. There's going to be an inclination for you to want to come in and change because you've sat down, you've thought about all the things that you want to do. You've considered how you would handle a crew, how you would handle your people, and you're going to want to change things. And in some respects, that's okay. But don't make wide sweeping changes right away. You don't want to come into a house or a crew and all of a sudden you've got this laundry list of things that you want to change. Now, granted, some things need to change. Some things do need to be different. Some things need to be fixed. Anything that is, life-threatening needs to be changed. Anything safety-related needs to change. But this is not a change everything meeting. This is a set your expectations meeting. And mine was real simple. And we had 3 rules. It was be professional, do the best job that you can every time you come in here, and be nice. Those were the 3 things that when I spoke with our battalion chief, we decided that the overall theme of the meeting and setting those expectations was very simple. Be professional, and that encompasses a lot of things. That encompasses being engaged when you're at the firehouse. When you're at the firehouse, be at the firehouse. We expect you to be professional on calls. Be professional. For PR, be professional. It encompasses a lot of things, but it was very general and was easy to remember. Secondly, do your best, and that means that be productive. Don't walk past a problem. If something needs to get done, get it done, finish it. And finally, be nice, not only to the customers that we serve, but to each other. You know, it's a second family. Be nice. But it's not necessarily a meeting to come in and say, we're changing the way we do everything. All right, that creates other problems for us. The one problem it does cause for us is it says to that crew, whoever they had prior to that, it's an indictment on the crew and it's an indictment on the past officer. And it can get real touchy, especially if that officer is just moving to a different crew and he's not retiring. But what you're saying essentially is that that officer's been doing it wrong all this time, and it's not going to be well received by the rest of the guys, whether they liked him or not. It's going to be looked upon as an indictment on that crew. So if you come in and say, you know, we're changing all of these things all at once, number one, they have certain perceptions of you before you walk in the door, and you might have just confirmed a few of them. However, if you're patient, if you wait a little bit and fix what needs fixed as you kind of go along, those are some things that they're going to gain some respect. Now, with the crew that I got for the first time, you know, the driver never wore a seatbelt, and the officers he had before had never made him wear a seatbelt. That was not a compromise. That had to change right away. Never wore his headset. That had to change right away. Those types of changes had to come. Our ambulances are really busy, and they're in the same house with us. So I decided the truck, our apparatus, is going to go to the store. We're going to buy the food. We're going to bring it back, and on most days we cook it. Well, he was not going to have any of that. But those were the expectations that were set. And the first day, the very first rotation that we had, I had to tell him every time we got in the apparatus, no matter if it was for an emergency call or just to go out and get fuel, to put a seatbelt on. But what that established right away was I was not going to back down. I wasn't yelling at him. I never had to write him up. We never had a coarse or a real boisterous conversation about it. It was always, hey, put your seatbelt on. But I knew I had to be patient because I was making some changes, and I was holding them accountable to things they hadn't been held accountable for. So you have to be patient. You have to slide into this a little bit. The other thing of not making wide sweeping changes it allows you to learn about the crew. You learn about their strengths, their weaknesses. You learn about their little nuances. You learn about who they are, who they aren't. You learn how they operate. Watch them, because some of the things you think might need changed might not need changed. It might be just fine. Just because they're not doing it the way you envisioned doesn't mean it's wrong. And if it's effective and it's working and they accept it, then that's something to embrace, and it's a part of them that you get to keep. And they're going to respect you for that. The other thing it allows them, the crew, to learn about you. Because trust me, I can tell you that a member of my crew, he had a specific perception of me. He didn't like me, and I know this because, you know, I had interactions, and he had an idea of what he thought I was. And now, after setting expectations and after being patient and not trying to change everything all at once, we've got a really good relationship, and we've got a good crew, and he's contributive and does all the good things that we want him to do. And we've used his knowledge. But if I would have come in and just balls to the wall, I'm changing everything, and I hadn't been patient, that relationship probably wouldn't have been fostered. So, seek input. Allow input, but not complaining. Now, you're going to have people, and that was what his deal was with going to the store and cooking. He had been with a crew that was somewhat lazy, and so he found himself doing all the cooking. He found himself doing everything, and the load getting put on him. So over the years, it gave him a bad taste in his mouth for how that works. Now, we did go ahead and change it, but there's going to be other things that you're going to want to implement that they're just going to complain about because it's either more work or it's different, and they don't like either one of those typically. But if you explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, you're going to typically get a little bit of buy-in. Now, if they do have legitimate problems, and there may be some things that they want to see change, maybe they didn't agree with the past officer that they had, and as long as they're not complaining and they're not throwing anybody under the bus, they can give you cold hard reasons why they want to see the change and it's not on your list, take that input and let them offer some solutions that you can implement together that's kind of fresh from everybody. Consider good ideas, but thoroughly evaluate and study before agreeing. And we talked a little bit about that early on. Take those good ideas, write them down, and it may be something that whoever brought that idea up, you sit down privately with and ask, hey, where's this coming from? Explain to me exactly how you envision this working. Why do we need to implement this? What's been the problem in the past? Because you don't want to agree to something that later on is a problem the more you think about it, and you don't want to get put in a corner like that. Be firm on your expectations and provide reasons. So when I explained that he had to wear his headset every time he was on the apparatus, he didn't like that. The guy doesn't like wearing the headsets. He doesn't like things on his head, period. He doesn't like wearing his helmet, doesn't like wearing a headset. And that was, he made that very clear. But I explained to him that when we're on that apparatus and he's driving, he's the operator and he's a senior guy in the house, I have to be able to communicate with him. And I explained to him, listen, it's not just for me to tell you what to do. It's also, I want to know what you're thinking. Where are you thinking to position this thing? Because I shouldn't have to tell him when we pull up to a house fire to get 3 sides. I know he's going to get 3 sides, but there's some times where I may want him to do something a little bit different. I want to make sure he knows where he's going. I also want to make sure that if something happens en route, I can communicate with him. And additionally, if I know what kind of call we're going to or we pull up, he can offer suggestions. Hey, there's a hydrant down here. I remember we had a call. Instead of hitting the hydrant on this location, we have better access on this side of the building. Things of that nature. Him being the senior guy, he's going to have some ideas. And once I explained it to him that way, he wears his headset on every call, every incident. Now, here's where the compromise comes in. There are days when we're just out puttering around. Maybe we're going to the store, maybe we're running an errand, that he will take it off. But for me, that's not a big deal. I'm okay with that. As long as soon as those tones hit, or I ask him to put those headsets on, then he'll put them on, and we've got a really good relationship, and he understands why. It's not just because Jason says to put the headphones on. It's because I have specific reasons as the officer on that apparatus that I want to communicate with my senior guy, my operator. You've got to list them. You've got to have some tactical expectations and some non-tactical expectations. In your first meeting, unless there's safety issues, you should probably try and keep it to non-tactical, because you want to get out on the drill ground and try and figure out what they're doing. However, if the hose bed's jacked up when you get there and tools are in disarray, those are kind of tactical things that need to change right away. But most of the time, you're going to find the tactical changes and expectations come from drilling. You have to put them through the motions and get them out, pulling hose, forcing doors, doing things to see where the deficiencies are, to see where changes, if any, need to be made. It might not be necessary at all. But it's hard to sit down with a brand new crew and say, hey, we're going to do this way, we're going to do that way, and from a tactical perspective, because you're not real sure what they're doing or how they're doing it. Now, yes, we all follow the same SOGs, but some people get there a little bit different than others. How they pull the hose, all those types of things could be a little bit different. Non-tactical can take time, and you need to evaluate. My list was pretty short when I went in for my first meeting. The primary things were, like we talked about, be professional, be engaged, do a good job, and be nice. And then everything else was the seatbelt. We're going to the store. Everybody in the kitchen at 4 o'clock. If it needs clean it. Because our priority during the day is not housework. Our priority during the day is fire stuff, drilling, training, fixing equipment, taking care of equipment, maintaining our equipment. Those things take priority. Whereas the crew that all these guys had before I had them, 8:30 everybody's doing housework, and that took precedent. And that was one of the expectations, was that, listen, as long as we keep the house clean as it needs clean and we pass off a clean house, okay, I don't care when it happens, unless there's a PR event or something of that nature. And that was different for them. But some other things that I had to take some time and evaluate were, how fast are guys getting out and bunking up and getting on the truck? Those are things that you have to see. Are they keeping their equipment maintained? washing their trucks? How do they look uniform-wise? Are they wearing the appropriate uniform? Do they look presentable? Do they know what to communicate with me and how to report to me the information that I want to make sure that I don't get left in the dark on? Those kinds of things are easy to address, and from a non-tactical standpoint, I didn't have to change a lot, but the little bit that I did change made a big difference. And tactical, from the tactical side of things, those expectations, there's very little room for collaboration. Now, I'll tell you this, it's always good to use some common sense. And it's a little bit off topic, but I think it's important because when you meet with your crew for the first time and you tell them that you want input and you want to use their experience and their training and you want to use their ideas and what they've been through in the past, you have to mean it. And so our SOGs state that all car fires, you have to pull a 1 3/4 inch hand line, which ours are all 200 feet for all car fires. And we understand the reason for that: exposures, quick knockdown, depending on the size of the vehicle, all that kind of stuff. But you also know that most engine compartment fires can be handled with a booster line, which we still carry on our trucks. So we had a fire one day, and it was a car fire. It was confined to the engine compartment. There were really no exposures. And, we pull up, and I'm like, hey, we're going to pull the blue line, which is the line, one of the pre-connected 1 3/4 inch lines. And my driver's like, I really think you could handle this with a booster line. Do you really want to pull that 200 feet? Because we were in a parking lot, and we really had to stretch and flake out that hose back and forth to get room, and it took time and all that stuff. And I'll tell you a story later on in a different module about another car fire that happened with some similar results. But in this particular day, there was no exposures. It was a pretty benign situation. And I said, no, just pull I followed the SOG. I said, pull it. And, okay, he didn't argue with me, didn't give me a hard time, but you could tell that, now we got to pull this line and everything. We put the fire out, and he goes, listen, I'm not trying to, bust your chops, but, you were just making more work, and it took a lot longer to get water on the fire, and people are standing around, and we're waiting, and all that kind of stuff, and he made sense. And I told him, I said, you know what, you're right. You're right. I said, I followed the SOG, but you know what, let's go talk to the chief, or the battalion chief, and see what kind of latitude we have with this SOG. So we went back, and I explained to the battalion chief the situation, and the ultimate result was, hey, if you've got a small car fire that's basically the engine compartment, and there's no exposures, there's no hazards, and you think you can put it with a booster line because you've got tight spaces, use a booster line. So what that did for me was I was able to take that information back to my senior guy and let him know that, hey, here's what we can do. You're right. You're right. And that goes a long way. And that's a tactical consideration that he offered up but two things happened there. One thing was, as the officer, I didn't compromise the SOG. Even though when he suggested it, and I kind of had a feeling he was right, I still did what the SOG said. Now, with that being said, when he offered the reason why he suggested using a booster line, I wasn't, no, that's not what the SOG says, and we're going to follow the SOG. No, I see his point, and I see the common sense in it. And I let him know that I appreciated his input and that I thought he had a valid point. And instead of discarding it completely, if we can make things a little bit better and validate and show some respect to these guys that have some good ideas and get staff involved to provide maybe a change in an SOG and go back, now he's also respected. You took the input and just didn't disregard it, and you've met those expectations that you talked about first day, right? So just keep that in mind. Why? You have to answer that question with everything you do. Do your homework. If you're going to throw something out there, and you're going to put it out there, do your homework. This same guy, he's very analytical. He's very smart. He reads Popular Mechanics. The dude is he's a sponge, but he's not going to take it just because some nationally known speaker says this is how you're going to do something. Especially because he's not going to just. He'll do what I tell him to do, but he's not going to understand or agree with it. But whenever we talked about smooth bores and why I prefer the smooth bore, He preferred the fog nozzle, and he and I were bantering back and forth about the differences, and we got to a point to where I didn't have all the answers. Well, you can't BS them. So I went in and I printed some articles off and some studies off, and the guy, 30 something years on the job, known for just going his own way, read them and came back out and says, you know what, I see what you're talking about, and we had a compromise. But if you don't have a why for what you're going to do, it's not going to work. So when you start setting these expectations, just like the headsets on the truck, I want you to wear the headset on the truck every time we go on a call and every time we're responding to an incident. Well, why? Have a valid point and reason why you're doing that. And most of the time, though, it's hard to argue those things. There are going to be people that you're just going to have to say, this is the way we're doing it, and these are the reasons why. And if you don't like that, then the reason why is because I'm your officer, and you got to answer to me. And not everyone likes that, but some people are easier to deal with. But in my experiences, what I found is the more you communicate, the more that you can give reasons why, the more that you can provide data and information, and not just your own. It can't be he said this, she said this. Be able to cite some resources. And I can go back to when we write SOGs out of the training division where I'm at. I will cite the documents and the textbooks and reference material at the end of the SOG, because some people in the department are going to think that you did that all by yourself, and there's no basis to it. Well, I go down and I put what page that this is referenced from and what book and everything, so that those books are in the engine houses. They can look it up and make their own assumptions as to what it means. Be able to have quantifiable reasons. All right, if I'm saying that I like the smoothbore because I can get more GPM with less pressure and more penetration and reach, be able to show that, which we've done. We've timed our tank, we've done flow testing, we've changed some of the ways we've operated, but you've got to quantify it. And not just because you said so. Again, there's going to be times where you're trying to give good answers, you're trying to give quantifiable reasons, but they're just not buying it. And at some point, you may have to just say, it's just because of the way we're doing it. It's just the way it is. When I told them we were going to the store, it's very hard to explain why the apparatus is going to go to the store, not the ambulance, other than the fact the ambulance is extremely busy. They carry the burden of the work in our department, and we're going to try and make their life as good as possible. That whole be nice part of the 3 rules, right? And don't get me wrong, the ambulance chips in. The guys on the ambulance, they do a phenomenal job, but we want to make sure we take care of them. We put food in the oven whenever we get out on a call to try and keep it warm. We wrap it up. We try and do our best to take care of them. And at first, that wasn't good enough for him because he had been stuck with some ambulance guys that didn't appreciate some of those things. We don't have that problem on our crew because we set those expectations early. But for him, that was one of those, well, this is the way we're doing it just because, and get over it. Which he did. So, some may not equal policies. For example, not all of your expectations are necessarily written policies or guidelines. Us going to the store and not the ambulance is not a rule that's covered in the collective bargaining agreement. It's not a rule that's covered in the policies. That's Jason's rule at House 1 at Florissant. That's my rule, and that's what we're going to do. It's the officer's rule. It doesn't violate any collective bargaining agreement article, and it doesn't violate any policy. Therefore, it has to be followed. It's my rule. So it may not be written. Don't block yourself in. And I'll never forget, when I was getting interviewed for promotion, one of the questions was, and I don't remember exactly how it went by, but they'd asked me about setting expectations and some rules that I had, and they were role playing, and it came down to the disgruntled employee was saying, well, is that in the collective bargaining agreement? My answer was no. And he goes, well, is it in the written policies? And my answer was no. He goes, well, then, so you're making your own rules? My answer was yes. Yes, as a company officer of my crew, there are going to be some Jason rules or some whoever you are rules, and you should have those rules. There's probably nothing that clearly identifies how often you clean and maintain your hand tools. Well, in Jason's engine house, there is, and we do it. And those are expectations and rules that are not written but have to be done. That's how it's the only way to operate. You have to have those unwritten rules as long as they don't violate your collective bargaining agreement or your internal policies. And we talked about that. And some of those rules may never have been done in your department before. And those are going to be the toughest ones. You know, whenever we started doing the hand tools, that was something that just typically wasn't done. It just wasn't done that way. You know, to pull those off a couple times a month, brush the rust off of them, make sure they're sharp, make sure there's no damaged handles, make sure the heads aren't damaged, make sure it's all in good working order, make sure hydrant wrenches are loose and put together right. And all of those things had never been done before. And so it was not an easy transition, but it was a great thing because the whole crew's out there. Everybody gets their hands on tools. We joke and laugh and have a good time. It passes the day, and everybody knows where the tools belong, what they're supposed to look like. So now it's great because guys come in for shift, and they can identify a dirty tool or an unkept tool or one that's missing in a matter of just minutes as soon as they walk past that particular compartment or that truck. And those are the kinds of things you want to do. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that's been done before. If you've got a great idea, it's going to create crew cohesiveness, it's going to make you more efficient, more effective, you want to establish that rule. And these rules need to be done because of their importance, what they mean to the crew. The whole idea for us going to the store is because it shows respect for the two people on that ambulance that particular day, and we're not burdening them with other things. Now, if they don't show some initiative to help whenever they do have downtime, then we've got another problem. Another example is we've always had a mechanic, and so the department has gotten real bad about taking problems and taking little mechanical issues that can be fixed at the company level and just leaving them for this guy who used to be a mechanic. My crew, we had a situation where the ambulance had a low tire, we had a plug kit, the lead medic went in and sat down and didn't even help. And I had to have a talk with the crew that, listen, if you're the lead medic that day, you're responsible for that apparatus. If it needs to be fixed, unless it goes outside, you're involved in fixing that, whether you're a mechanic or not. You need to learn because that guy that's fixing it's not going to be there forever. So those are the kinds of expectations that aren't written, but they're important. Everybody needs to know how to access the batteries on the ambulance. Everybody needs to know how to identify certain things, how to change bulbs, how to fix little things. It's not in the CBA, it's not in the policies, but in my house, if that guy's gone, they know where the tools are. They know how to plug a tire. They know how to do certain things. And those are some of the expectations that you've got to instill. Pick a time period, and it doesn't matter what kind of time period you pick. I do a class about it's the rule of 90s. And I like to give 90 days. That gives you, about 30 shifts or so, depending on your schedule, to really figure people out. You get to know them, they get to know you. They know what makes you mad, hopefully. You know what makes them mad. And quite honestly, you know how to address people. The one thing I avoid at all costs, and one thing that they weren't used to, is I don't discipline. I typically don't have to discipline anybody. We have conversations, and those conversations very seldom take place behind a closed door. But I've kind of gotten to know them. And, the one guy that didn't like me when I first started, when I first got him on my crew, he's a soccer nut. He played soccer at a high level as a young adult and in high school and college. Coaches soccer, coaches his daughters. Now he coaches his granddaughter. The soccer nut. Well, when I brought him on, my oldest son was looking for a club team, and I didn't really care what club team he went to, because the one he was on, they moved up in age and they didn't keep the team together. Well, my driver was part of a club team that he loved. He loved the club. It was the one he coached in and was real involved in. And we got to talking because I knew that was a common denominator between the two of us, and it kind of helped create a relationship that we have today. And because I knew what he was interested in, and so I talked to him about soccer all the time, and it really broke the ice and changed things for us. And so when it came time to sign my kid up for a club team, guess where I did it at? I did it with his club. And he thought that was awesome. And as the spring went through, we would be at the soccer park together. We saw each other. We talked about, people that we had in common from the soccer club. And he would call on Saturdays, hey, are you at the soccer field? I'll come watch your boy for a little bit. Get to know your people. It makes all the difference in the world. What makes them tick and what they expect. And it changed our relationship, and it really got buy-in. And he saw me in a different way. I saw him in a different way, and it really worked out well. Figure out what does and does not need fixed or changed. And that's just going to take time, and it may not happen in the time period that you pick. If you want to pick 6 months, pick 6 months. If you want to pick 4 months, it's whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you're doing. Now, you can also say at your initial meeting, hey, in 90 days we're going to come back, and we might have some additional expectations, and we're going to have a crew meeting and discuss some things. But if you see something that needs changed right away, you need to change that. But typically this time period allows perceptions to change, and that's what happened with me and this driver. It allowed us to change the perceptions of what he had of me, what he thought I was, and now he doesn't want to work with any other officer, which is fantastic because I don't want him working with anybody else because he's so valuable. And then it earned respect. Respect is not given; it's something that you have to work for, and it's something you have to earn. And by respecting him and making sure that I helped to validate some of his ideas. I kept him in the loop. I took information and ideas that he had and put them into play. And that made all the difference in the world with us and the amount of respect that we have for each other. And now our crew not only has respect for each other, we have a lot of respect for the fire department, what it means to work for the fire district and serve the customers that we serve. And I'm proud to say that our crew is looked at in 2 different ways. There's not much middle of the road because we're productive and we're busy and we do a lot of work and we do things that the other people leave behind, and we don't complain about it, but it gets noticed. So, we've got people asking to come to our crew because they want to work with the guys on our shift at our house, and then the other half hate our guts because we make them look bad. And I told our guys, I said, this is how we want to be perceived. It's one extreme or the other because one sees the value in what we're doing and they want to be a part of it. The other ones see the value in what we're doing and it just makes them look bad, so then they try and throw stones. And I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. And I think that's where we're a good place for us to be as a crew. But a lot of that is because we built respect for each other over that time period, and we have that respect has grown not just between us as individuals, but as firefighters, as paramedics, between officer and firefighter, but also the respect that we have for staff, for the job, for being productive, we're not going to walk by a problem. We're not going to walk past something that needs to be done. We're going to get it done. And that's all based on respect. We respect each other. Even though the other crews may not do that, we respect ourselves and our reputation too much to say, we're going to leave it because they did. And that's all because it's grown, that reputation and respect has grown over time. So in summary, have a plan and stick to it. It doesn't mean you can't change after an evaluation period, after you've set those expectations. But have a plan and know what you're going to talk about. Be patient and respectful. This is not going to be an easy transition, especially if you have things that you need to change right away, if they're going to be tough, if it's going to make them have to work a little harder, things they're not used to. It's not going to be easy. Be realistic with your changes. Don't come in with unrealistic changes. And we'll talk later on in a different module about setting goals for your crew. And have the why ready for everything you do. If you want to switch hose loads, have a why. And also, if you switch hose loads and it doesn't work like you thought it would, change it back. All right? have the flexibility that in the realism to know, hey, this was a good, sounded good on paper. We tried it, it doesn't work. We're going back to what we were doing before. Don't be afraid to do that. And reevaluate and change as needed. You have to continually evaluate what's going on, what's working, what's not working, what's effective, what's not effective. What was maybe a little over the top, we need to dial down a little bit, or maybe it's dialed down too much, we need to put a little more pressure in a certain area. Make sure you keep doing those things.